The United States of America will always seek peace, but under President Trump, the shield stands guard and the sword stands ready.
Vice President Mike Pence on his tour through Asia issuing another stern warning to North Korea about its weapons program. And we're back now with the panel. Kim, how do you assess the president's foreign policy so far, especially when it comes to North Korea?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've learned two things. There was a lot of fear when he was out on the trail that this was an isolationist president. Absolutely not. And in fact, what we're seeing is a president who rejects the Obama philosophy that this is a paradigm in which you either have to go in, put troops on the ground, and that's the only way to deal with a hotspot versus, or we do nothing. So this is a president, again, you know, take out a Syrian airbase, drop a giant bomb in Afghanistan, and engage with a lot of diplomacy and sticks and carrots. So that's one thing that we've learned, is that he's going to take action. The other one, I think, is if there's any sort of a Trump doctrine, and it would be a stretch to go that far, but this is a transactional president. Much in the same way he does things domestically, he wants to make a deal. You see this is how he is working in the global sphere as well, too, linking priorities of countries with national security. So we saw that with China, saying, well, maybe I won't name you a currency manipulator if you do something about North Korea. And I think that's how we're going to see him go moving forward.
There was also an interesting development this week when it came to Iran. The State Department had to certify that Iran is complying with a nuclear deal, but then there was a lot of tough talk from top administration officials indicating they're going to take a tougher line on Iran. Here they are.
It is another example of buying off a power who has nuclear ambitions. We buy them off for a short period of time, and then someone has to deal with it later.
Everywhere you look, if there's trouble in the region, you find Iran.
Peter, is that just rhetoric, or do your sources indicate to you the president really intends to crack down, take sanctions against Iran outside of the nuclear deal for things like their support for terror?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's interesting. Why do they do that this week? Because, in fact, as you mentioned, the deadline for certifying whether or not Iran was in compliance with the deal, they have no evidence at this point to suggest that they're not, even though obviously everybody is suspicious. And so they had to make that certification. They didn't want that to be the message. They didn't want the message, the headline to be, you know, Trump says Iran's doing fine. So they had to come out and say, look, we understand Iran is doing terrible things when it comes to terrorism, when it comes to destabilizing the region, when it comes to its ballistic missile program, and we're going to take action. I don't think there's anything imminent that you could look at, but they're going to look at sanctions. They're going to look at other ways of trying to, you know, hem in or contain Iran, as it will. And I think part of the goal is to, in some ways, to kind of provoke Iran so that if the deal goes away, it will be Iran's fault, not the United States' fault, so that Europeans wouldn't bolt away from, you know, the American ally.
Meanwhile, today in France, they are holding the first round of a presidential election in the wake of that terror attack on the Champs-Élysées in Paris this week. President Trump tweeted Friday, "The people of France will not take much more of this. Will have a big effect on presidential election," and he has made little secret of the fact that he favors Marine Le Pen, head of the far-right anti-immigrant National Front Party. But Karl, if Le Pen were to actually win, wouldn't that have a dramatic effect on Europe and the European Union?
Oh, certainly. And in fact, if three of the candidates win, it will have a dramatic effect. We have Le Pen on the far right, we have Mélenchon on the far left, both saying out of NATO, restructure the European Union. You have three candidates, the Republican, Francois Fillon, saying, we think we ought to have a better relationship with Putin. So they have a two-stage election. So we're going to have the first round, two people will be selected by tomorrow. And then on May 7th, we'll have two that are going to run off. Right now, in all of the matchups, Marie Le Pen, if she gets into the runoff, which she's likely to do, loses to all the other candidates. The one that she is closest to is Fillon, who's plagued by a scandal. But there is a populism sweeping through France with more ferocity than it swept through American politics last year.
Charles, we should point out that if nobody gets through, and it's unlikely that it gets 50% of the vote today, they have a runoff on May 7th, 2 weeks from now. What's at stake in this election? In effect, why should we care in terms of the impact it's going to have on U.S. and our relationship with the world?
Well, there's a lot of reasons to care. I mean, starting with the fact that a victory for Le Pen or Mélenchon would be a real shock to global markets, because each of them, as people have indicated, are very skeptical about the whole euro and the European Union. It would be a real unsettling of expectations economically. But more importantly, the entire security architecture of the Western world depends on a stable France in alliance with the rest of the European Union. And as Karl pointed out, this extraordinary upsurge of populism in such a major country would create all kinds of unpredictable circumstances. And, you know, I think what we're also learning here is that Europe has postponed solving its problems a long time now. And France is exhibit A of that. They have 10% unemployment. They have chronic terrorism. They can't seem to get their arms around either of those problems year after year after year. And finally, the political bill is starting to come due for that. Europe may dodge this bullet. In fact, I would, if I had to bet, I'd say they will this time. But it may be they get a second chance after this one be their last second chance. And everybody in the whole world should be very concerned that that situation become unstable.
So, Peter, if Chuck is right, and we have to consider that possibility that he is actually right.
It happens sometimes.
It's certainly out there. Why would President Trump, if this endangers our national security in terms of NATO, it endangers Europe, why is President Trump in effect supporting Le Pen?
Well, obviously he doesn't see it that way. He sees her as a like-minded avatar of populist unhappiness with the system, smash the system. And if she wins, then in his view, it's a reaffirmation of the political forces that brought him to power. And remember, he's feeling very insecure about his election. That's why you still see him talking a lot about how many electoral votes he won and so forth. And what he is looking there for, I think, is for some sort of popular expression of disenchantment that will ratify what he's doing here.
Well, I want to just say I asked to cover the primary from Paris, but wiser heads prevailed. All right, panel, see you next Sunday.